So I think the best place you can go to look for data on stuff is the CDC actually has quite a bit of data available on these different topics. So that's actually probably they're not CDC is not normally known as a conservative source for stuff. But if you parse through the actual data, because typically the argument that we hear from the other side is that it's generally some form of, well, guns are used in crime, therefore if we reduce the number of firearms we reduce crime. That's the very rough argument that we often hear from the other side. But I think when you actually parse through the data, you'll actually find that higher crime areas actually have lower rates of firearm ownership. Typically the higher crime areas are your more metropolitan areas. Metropolitan areas have much lower rates of firearm ownership as opposed to rural areas. Rural areas tend to have very high rates of firearm ownership and typically much less crime. This is true in New Mexico. This is true all over this country. And that's kind of one of the key data points we push back at is like, well, if there's not in fact, if anything, there's a negative correlation between rate of firearm ownership and crime rate when you look at how things are balanced in terms of firearm ownership rate in kind of more metropolitan areas versus more rural areas, because rural areas tend to have very high rates of firearm ownership and lower crime compared to more metropolitan areas.